And we're live. Guys, welcome to one whole year with the Indigo Podcast.
1 year. Wow. Yes,
Yes.
indeed. It is our 1 year anniversary as the Indigo Podcast. And in today's episode, which we are also broadcasting live via Facebook and YouTube, we're going to discuss where we've been. We're going to talk about what we're trying to do with this whole thing. And we're going to talk about the future of the Indigo Podcast and Indigo together. And I'm just so stoked about all of this. Aren't you, Chris?
Yes, to say I'm stoked would be the understatement of the year. So we start off just doing like, well, gee, how do we do a podcast? I don't know. Let's Google it.
That's
Okay.
right.
Let's buy some stuff and do this. Oh, maybe we should get webcams, like a total like nerd out, having fun with tech, putting this together because we had a compelling message to say. And we just, sometimes when the art wells up in you, you just got to get it out.
That's right. That's right. And, maybe we start with just a little recap of where we've been with the Indigo Podcast, because I know our listener audience base has definitely grown over that time. And so many of our listeners may not have actually been around at the beginning. We don't really know for sure. But we have, in the past year, done 80, that's 80 episodes, right? And 81 if you count the John Kroger episode that we released yesterday. So today is November 4th, 2020. We technically launched on November 1st of 2019. It's so exciting.
Yeah. So tons and tons of episodes. We started off with just one a week. And then we were like, hey, we know these really cool people. Let's get them on. And then it was like, man, we know a lot of cool people doing cool things. We need to amplify their voice. But then we're like, man, we kind of miss doing deep dives into the literature. And so next thing you know, we're doing two a week. Then our buddy Mike was like, man, I love what you guys are doing. Let's do one about all the agile and agility stuff that we do. And we're like, well, Mike's a good time. And so let's do it. And so we are just growing and growing. And we even have some ideas in the hopper. So we might even be able to get up to 5 podcasts a week.
Who knows?
Because we're sick like that.
It is a lot of work. It really is, but it is a labor of love, and I think it is just a worthy cause that we're devoted to in terms of trying to bring some evidence-based practices to everyday life and to increase the flourishing of people at work and beyond through some things that we know work, right? And we delve into the social science. When we talk about the workplace, we draw upon all kinds of academic literature on that. We've had episodes where we've talked about things like family and other types of relationships. And there's so many different ways in which we can flourish in life. So it goes way beyond just the workplace. Maybe we could talk about what are some of our top episodes. Now, this is kind of a tricky thing to measure because certainly there is a bias towards those that were released earlier in terms of how many downloads they have, but just kind of a rough take at it. If we look at some of our top episodes out there that we've done in the past year, what are some of those? And I bet our listeners probably can guess at some of them because they are the top ones, but what were some of the ones that you would say are the top episodes?
Well, definitely. And I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. It's good that people are getting this information, but it's kind of a bummer that this is the case. But take this job and shove it, all about burnout.
Yeah.
So, and this is like, November timeframe last year, Well, yeah, it's our 1 year anniversary. So November last year, pre-COVID and everything, and people were already, kind of struggling with this burnout thing. And the top guest episode, I would say, Ben, was...
It was our episode with Kate Ball, our good friend Kate, and it was and we're trying to figure out why, right? Why that episode in which she talks about her career, some of the big pivots she's made, some of the key moments that helped her in her career. And we were trying to figure out why was that episode so engaging for folks, and why did it resonate so much with people? And I think part of it that you and I have talked about is that she is just so genuine in that episode, talking about not only her successes but her failures, and knowing like, hey, I don't have it all figured out, and I didn't have it all figured out all along the way. I had to find my way just like everybody else.
Yeah. So many emails and even text messages for some of our listeners that happen to have my cell phone. Occasionally that thing gets out there, but we're just like, they were so encouraged by Kate Ball's narrative, and well, she's just flipping awesome. So of course, no surprise there. But yeah, so.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, we started this podcast, the Indigo podcast, with a number of episodes that we were just doing on our own, one per week. And then we started having guests once we got comfortable with the technology and started moving in that direction. And so over the past year, we actually had 18 episodes that had guests, if you include our most recent one that we released yesterday. And that was 18 episodes, but 19 guests, because one of those episodes actually had 2 guests. That was our episode with Matt Crane and Kelsey Medeiros. So I think we should just mention really quickly what were those episodes that had guests, and just say thank you to our guests and remind folks just really briefly some of the things that we talked about in those episodes. So our first guest that we ever had was my good friend Joe Allen. He's a professor at the University of Utah, and we talked about a number of things related to organizational psychology and healthcare. That was a great episode. And then who did we have next?
Yeah, so we had Lee Williams, and
she's the
we
best.
talked about our dogs, because her dogs are cool.
We did, but we didn't just talk about our dog. So she is an expert on meetings. That was what she did her doctoral research on. And she is now a nonprofit consultant doing lots of great things. And so we had her on to talk about virtual meetings. So go check that episode out if you haven't already. We then had our episode with Kate Ball, as we've already talked about. And then probably definitely one of our most downloaded episodes, and certainly a very important episode, was our episode with Enrica Ruggs.
Yeah, ending racism at work. And, what is racism? We cover a bunch of that stuff, then actually launched a bit of a research project. We're all on a same team doing some work with some awesome academics in this space. You guys should bookmark the website endingracismatwork.com, where we're going to publish .org, sorry, endingracismatwork.org, and check out some of the stuff that we're doing in the anti-racism space.
That's right. And then after that, we had an episode with Stephen Rogelberg, and Stephen is a longtime friend and colleague of mine, mentor, fantastic person. We talked about industrial and organizational psychology. We talked about his book, The Surprising Science of Meetings. That was a phenomenal episode. And one thing that I took away from that was just a lot of hope around how we can use science to make the workplace better.
Yeah. And that, the next one was Todd Do It. Right? Which,
Dr. Do It.
I kind of turn my nose up at the whole motivational speaking stuff, even though a lot of it's good. Except, remember the guy that sawed off his arm to get out of the canyon?
Yeah.
And his message was I know everybody brings me around to be like, let's see this guy that sawed off his hand, but don't do what I did. I did everything wrong. Anyway, Todd's the kind of guy, he can speak in that motivational speaker like you're in a revival tent meeting down in the South for going to church on how you should be ethical in business, but he has a PhD and it's actually evidence-based. And that is the stuff that, man,
right.
So amazing.
So he's legit. He's one of those people who we endorse. We think he's great. We then had an episode with Bill Gentry where we talked about career development. He's an expert in that space. It's a phenomenal episode. Definitely encourage people to check that out, especially if you're thinking about moving through your career in different ways and thinking about how you can navigate a complex career landscape. We then had an episode that I think, actually, I'm going to highlight 2 episodes here with guests. So, today is November 4th, 2020. Yesterday was the general election in the United States. Certainly, we have many contentious issues in the United States, many divisions within our society. We've had 2 guests in the past year that I think really bring some perspective and bring some excellent thought to how we should think about citizenship, how we should think about public service. And one of those was Mike Davila. The other one was John Kroger. And Mike's episode was fantastic. I just really enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah, Mike Davila is a giant, and he's starting this thing called the Grindstone Institute that's going to bring civics education back into K through 12 curriculum. It's going to be awesome. That guy never does anything half-baked, so
no,
fantastic.
He's the real deal, for sure. And then we had Mike Richardson, with whom we now do a weekly episode, The Agility Conversation. We do that with him. And, Mike, I've known Mike for a long time. He is full of great ideas. He's been there. He's done that. And one thing that I really like about Mike is that he continually learns and develops and iterates upon his ideas, in a way that he knows a lot. And at the same time, he is always learning. It's fantastic. I definitely encourage people to check that out. Many of his ideas are around how we can bring more agility into our leadership practices, into our teams, into our organizations, to help us all thrive in a more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world.
Yeah. So our next episode, or I guess going down the list of guests, is Matt
They
Crane
are in order. Yep.
and Kelsey Medeiros, right? So a lot of the stuff we covered with guests, we kind of know because, we're in this space and stuff. One of the things that I enjoyed about Kelsey and Matt's episode was we got to go deep into the thicket and to the meta woods, as it were, with some of these larger models, mental models for how leaders make sense of things and how they inform their decisions, how they're constrained by their followers, all these kinds of things. They looked at Trudeau, Merkel, and Bolsonaro, and fantastic deep dive. And a lot of this stuff is actually used for intelligence agencies and stuff, but it has a lot to do, applicability, to the world of work and even the competitive environment that you might find yourself in.
That's right. So their episode was all about pandemic leadership based upon an article that they published where they analyzed some world leaders with regard to their responses to COVID. And then we had Dave Schramm, right? Dave Schramm, he is an expert on family and family relationships and actually taking some of those ideas to businesses. And he is a phenomenal resource that he has a lot of great content out there on Facebook and his YouTube channel. Definitely encourage folks to check out that episode if they're interested in anything related to productive relationships in their lives, right?
Yeah, it's hard to thrive at work when your home life is not doing well.
That's right.
And so and we hope to cover more of this topic as we go forward. You can climb to the heights of business and lose your soul and family life doing it. So we don't recommend that thing. Dave Schramm, check out Dr. Dave Speaks, I think is his website. Mm-hmm. And his stuff on Facebook and YouTube. Just cannot recommend the stuff that he's doing enough.
For sure. And then we had an episode with Josh Cogswell where we talked about ostracism in the workplace. And Josh is such a thoughtful, smart, interesting person. It was just a fantastic episode, and it was based upon a study that he published on that very topic of ostracism in the workplace. And this is one of those ways in which the workplace and our work lives can really influence in a negative way sometimes our own personal well-being. Yeah. And, one of the things that they found in their study was that leadership is such a central component to avoiding and minimizing ostracism in the workplace.
Yeah, Josh, I freaking love Josh, and I've only met him virtually, but he's the kind of person you just want to hug and keep around because he's that quality.
That's right.
The next one is a good friend of yours from grad school days that's all grown up, super executive in a really small company called TIAA.
Yeah.
And Marissa Carson.
Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah, we were able to connect with Marissa and talk about talent management and the role of organizations and how they should deal with issues related to people in the workplace in a more complex environment in which change is more common. Dealing with COVID, right? Certainly has been a curveball that all organizations have had to deal with that has had huge talent implications. And so that was a fantastic episode as well.
Yeah. So we get a lot of requests from people who want to be guests on this podcast.
We do.
And I'm just going to sound snooty unabashedly for a minute. Most of these jackwagons aren't ready for the stuff we're throwing down, right?
No, we don't respond to 99% of them. We just can't because there's so many. And because it's just not a good fit. It wouldn't be good for them. It wouldn't be good for us.
But sometimes they get through, and then we talk to them, and you're like, man, I don't think you have mastery of your material. You're not, because we'll go anywhere. Right. But so this guy, David Horning, right?
Cool
he
dude.
Reaches out, and he's like, I'm a comedian and want to come on your podcast.
Right. And a lot of the people who contact us have written a book and, something that they want to kind of, promote. This guy, he's like, hey, I'm a comedian in the Cleveland area. I love your podcast. Would love to come and discuss, humor in the workplace. And immediately we thought, this is really interesting. And as we got to know him and talk to him, he is full of great ideas. And so that was a really fantastic and wonderful episode that we did on humor in the workplace. And then we moved from, that topic where we definitely laughed a lot to just one of the most fast-paced, yet probably one of our longest episodes with Neil Shortland. On decision making. A big contrast in styles, but both of them were phenomenal episodes. But I really enjoyed both of them. Neil talked a lot about his research on decision making, how people make decisions, how we can optimize our decision making in some circumstances.
Yeah, Neil is like a machine gun of excellent ideas. He's like, with a British accent. So he's like, boy. He's just like nailing. You're like, gosh, it's so much. It's so awesome. Amazing.
Yeah.
It's thorough. And I remember at the end, I was like, well, dare I ask, Neil, is there anything else you'd like to add? And he's like, no, I gave you everything.
You're like, great, let's stop there. Yeah. I guarantee we'll try to get Neil on again in the future. Then we had an episode with Court Rudolph, and Court Rudolph in that episode just threw a big grenade into the cesspool of research and thought out there on generational differences. This has been a topic that's been talked about for more than a decade now, about how different generations think differently, that these millennials and Gen Zers or whatever are kind of a different species in the workplace. He debunks it all, with great research, and it's a phenomenal episode. Definitely recommend folks check that one out, because we shouldn't be trying to manage people based upon their generation. It just isn't. It's not real.
Yeah, we've all met an old soul. He's like 18, but he might as well have his loafers and be bebopping around the retirement center. He's like, hey, likes free powdered mashed potatoes. But the generation stuff, guys, is garbage. So if you're in an organization that's doing this, you need to share this episode or share some of Court's research directly. Evidence, thoroughly done, excellent way. And it's not just small people. Like the APA has made some mistakes around generation stuff and some of their stuff. And so, easily missed, but it's a folk myth that needs to die. Help us kill it. Help Court kill it. Then Court can research something else.
Yes, free up his talents to do other things. It's fantastic. Then we did an episode with Rob Breener, and Rob Breener is one of those people who I had on our list to have as a guest very early on when we were just thinking about this podcast. And the reason is that his area of research and thought and writing is all around the idea of evidence-based practice, which resonates so much with what we are trying to do, right? When we, even with our name, when we talk about Indigo Together, or our consulting firm, Indigo Anchor, Indigo was a dye that was prized for millennia within different civilizations, and has long been thought of as a symbol of creativity and innovation, right? And that's kind of part of that. And then the anchor that we talk about with our consulting firm is evidence, and using evidence, be it scientific evidence from the social sciences on how people behave in organizations, or other types of sources of expertise and experience and evidence. But, Rob was just a phenomenal guest.
Yeah, that guy. And he introduced us to this thing. Apparently, there's a box that you can put a banana in, so it doesn't get squished. I had so many times of squished bananas in my lunch, little transformer lunch pail. And,
that's
anyway.
Right. As Rob calls it, the banana guard, right?
Yes. The banana guard.
Yes, indeed. And then we had our episode that we released just yesterday on November 3rd, 2020. With John Kroger. And, I mentioned Mike Davila's episode where we talked a lot about public service and our country, and we talked about similar things with John. And John was a fantastic guest who has a really interesting background. He was the first chief learning officer of the United States Navy. He was the former attorney general of the state of Oregon, and had other huge roles. He was the president of Reed College.
Didn't he prosecute Enron or something?
He just kind of threw that in there. Yeah, I kind of did some prosecutorial work on Enron.
You could stack up everything he's done, and that'd be an episode unto itself. So, but we actually got to talk to him, and you should check out the Aspen Institute that John works at. And also his episode, he's just such a giant of a person, and there's so much good that you can take away
That's
from that.
right. That's right. And, part of his message is around how we can do better as a society and how we can work together better, how we can be more thoughtful in our interactions, how we can, come to solutions together in a better way. And I just think those are really interesting and needed types of conversations to have.
Yeah. So I guess we should talk about what we're trying to do here.
Right. What is, we got this podcast that we devote a lot of time to and try to do some cool stuff with. What's it all about? And I think one way maybe to share with our listeners what this is all about is to refresh their memories. If you listen to one of our early episodes, we talked about this, but to talk about what we call the Indigo Manifesto. And the Indigo Manifesto is on our website. People can check it out there. But I actually want for folks to know exactly what it is. So I think we will share the Indigo Manifesto with people right now. What do you think?
Yeah. Before we do, though, we were talking before the episode started. We're waiting for the countdown so we're not late type thing. And you're like, hey, Chris, it's been a good year. I was like, it hasn't been a waste of life for me. And there's been a lot of things in my life that, sometimes necessity requires certain things. Waiting in lines at Disneyland with my kids. Well, it was great. You got to do it. Disneyland is awesome with kids, but, there's certain things, certain jobs and places. But working with Ben here and doing what we're doing with this podcast has been one of the most important, if not the most important thing I've ever done in my life. And when we were starting, we were like, hey, we need a manifesto to guide, what's going to provide that kind of scope of what we are trying to achieve. And so we wrote this, and, I was rereading it today, and it still rings true deep into my soul about this is what I want to dedicate my life to here.
Right.
So yeah, Ben, why don't you kick it off?
Okay, well, let's go then. The Indigo Manifesto. We believe that the world is better when people flourish at work. Today, work and work-related activities comprise a major share of the hours we're awake. This wasn't always the case. In fact, organizations as we know them today, by and large, did not exist until the Industrial Revolution, which occurred generally in the latter half of the 1700s through the first half of the 1800s. Even then, it took another half-century or so before people began to shift en masse from agricultural, family-centered existence to employment as we know it today.
Prior to this shift, the primary large organizations with which people interacted included only governments and their military forces, along with various organized religions and some educational institutions.
Now, we live our lives in many ways through and as members of organizations. Many of us are born in healthcare organizations. Shortly after birth, at least in the United States, we enter various government organizations that register us, issue us birth certificates, and issue us social security numbers. It's likely that we then often experience various forms of childcare organizations, followed by preschools, schools, and work organizations. Along the way, we're likely to spend some time in various other organizations, be they civic, sports-related, religious, or social in nature. Of course, we also engage in and with numerous organizations on a daily basis through our work, commerce, and play.
All of these organizational encounters and experience shape us. They give us identity, an answer to the question, what do you do? They put us in contact with numerous other people who influence us and who in turn we influence. Because of these realities, these taken for granted features of modern existence, if we want to make the world a better place, a great place to focus upon is the workplace. Focusing upon work and the people that conduct that work is our passion. And by improving the conversation and path forward regarding the future of work and organizations, we hope to have a positive influence on people everywhere.
We believe that human flourishing is a complex, multi-level interaction. That brings us to the idea of flourishing. What do we mean by human flourishing? We understand human flourishing through both what it is and what it is not. Flourishing is akin to thriving. It includes the full spectrum of wellness. It includes growth, resilience, and living a life in an optimal range of one's potential. Flourishing is not simply human survival.
At an individual level, human flourishing has psychological foundations and components, along with associated notions of how we see the world and our place within it. The vast majority of modern existence puts us in contact with others. These interactions raise the questions, how should we act in the world? The answer to this question involves an examination of morality and what compass might guide us as we move forward.
Modernity is the story of emergent human thriving. Despite the many substantial problems and suffering that certainly exists, quality of life has indeed improved dramatically during the past 2 centuries. And yet, technological advancements pose new challenges regarding the world of both work and daily life, along with the intended and unintended consequences of those advancements.
Given that life is organizational in nature, the concept of human flourishing necessitates an exploration of the relationship between people at work as individuals and the organizations in which they are members. It also involves the complex interactions that we have with each other on a daily basis and how we navigate social norms. At some level, we want people to admire us, to like us, to want to be around us, and we want that admiration or connection to be deserved. We want to be worthy of it. But what does that look like, and how do we achieve it in modern society and in the modern world of work?
Beyond the individual and team or organizational level, human flourishing involves additional questions about our communities, the social fabric that brings us together or creates fault lines between groups, and the broader context of all organizations. These broader collectives must also ask themselves, how should we act in the world? With regard to human flourishing, the connections among employees, organizations, their various stakeholders, and their specific environments matter greatly. Suboptimal flourishing is a loss of life that has nothing to do with death, but a loss of the life best lived. This is the stuff that makes the world better. This flourishing must be enabled by both the exploration of these larger themes and sets of actionable practices.
Human flourishing is necessarily a complex topic, yet it is one of utmost importance with implications for society, organizations, teams, leaders, and daily life.
We believe that opportunities to improve human flourishing abound. Our experience in organizations, both as members of them and as consultants working to improve them, suggests that human flourishing is not particularly common. That means there is much opportunity for improvement.
We want to explore these opportunities by examining the relevant social science and finding evidence-based practices that will help. Our approach is inherently interdisciplinary, with insights coming from the fields of industrial and organizational psychology, management, sociology, communication studies, political science, philosophy, and more.
It is within this space that we dedicate our efforts as curious people, academics, consultants, and practitioners, and swing for the fences to make the world better.
Man, it's just as good now as when we wrote it.
There it is. That is the Indigo Manifesto. And I know it's a lot. There's a lot going on there, using some big words. I took some of the big words that Chris had in there originally and made them smaller. But, it really does capture what we're trying to do because, we're only on this planet for a limited period of time. This is not a dress rehearsal. And, it's a one-way street, folks, and we have to do our best with that. And I think so much of it has to do with how we relate with each other at work and at home. And what we're trying to do is to promote that flourishing in both of those domains.
I know so many times in my life, you just go, you get a book. I'm struggling with this. So, back before the internet was really big, you'd go get it and you'd read. And then maybe that was good, maybe it wasn't. But now, with the web and everything we have going on, we can actually find evidence-based practice. And I got to say, it's a desert. There's a famine of evidence-based publications out there that lay people can grab hold of and do something with to make their lives better right now. As somebody who struggled and looked for those evidence-based interventions for stuff like my marriage, for business, for project management, for a whole host of things, that's the message that needs to get out there, not this well, I'm a famous person. Look, I wrote a book. Buy it.
Right. And so I think that brings us to a little bit of conversation around the future of the Indigo podcast and this idea called Indigo Together. We mentioned on the podcast, for example, that if people want to contact us, which we certainly encourage, go to indigotogether.com/contact, right? Indigotogether.com is our kind of umbrella website for the podcast and other activities. But I think it'd be worth it for our listeners to understand a little bit what we're trying to do with Indigo Together. What is that all about? And what are you thinking there, Chris?
Well, yeah. So if we go into an organization and they've got stinking meetings, right?
And they've got stinking thinking.
Yeah. So anyway, you go in there and you're like, man, these meetings stink. Well, we didn't do a bunch. Ben, you did some research in meetings, actually a decent amount, right? But Stephen Rogelberg owns the meeting space as far as evidence-based research, practice, all that kind of stuff. So we go to Stephen Rogelberg. And so the Indigo Together is, it's not just us, right? And we do some research, and we do try to add to the conversation that's happening academically. But Indigo Together is bridging the research practice gap. It is together with you, the listener, and those people out in organizations. And it's together with the giants, the intellectual giants that are researching and studying this full time. And so we can climb up on the shoulders of giants and see a bit further. And so it's all of us. It's us as kind of a conduit and bridge to highlight some of these messages. It's the academics, and it's you, the wanderer of life.
That's right. You know, and the way I think about it as well is that Indigo Together is this umbrella under which there are about human flourishing at work and beyond, right? That's the umbrella. And then within that are a variety of different pillars and things that we want to explore further and to help people with. So we obviously do a lot related to business and the workplace. The Indigo podcast is certainly part of that. Some of those episodes are directly related to matters of management and leadership and HR and so forth. Some of them are related more towards the individual life and what you do outside of work and how you can flourish there. But there are other streams within Indigo Together that we hope to explore even more fully in the future. Things like, family and relationships, things like financial management for your own personal finances. Those types of topics that are so important for our everyday flourishing and that a lot of people don't have sorted out.
Yeah. If you got to go to India for 2 years to set up a shared service center and your family's going to stay behind because critical, what's sexual health look like for you during that time? I mean, that's a long time to be away from your family. How will you manage communication and staying plugged in with your kids? Disciplinary issues while you're overseas. I mean, there's so many things that are kind of talked about tangentially or maybe shared by people who've been there, done that. But, we can dive into some evidence-based practice so you can flourish no matter where your work finds you.
Right. And we're not saying that we are the experts by any means on all of these different topics.
We tag them in.
Right.
We tag them in.
Right. And we want, and what we're trying to do with the podcast and other means that we have and things that we're thinking about is we want to be that amplifier of good ideas. And we want to help those people who are out there doing good work, doing good research, who have good ideas, to have a bigger voice. Because I think we have it pretty well sorted out. We get better every time with our podcast, with other types of communication. But I think that that's a role that we can really play to help the world get a little bit better.
Yeah. So we've got more guests coming down the pike. Let's talk about. Yeah. We got a whole bunch of them.
We do. We have a number of. Now, let me just recap really quickly. So we talked about kind of how this podcast has evolved. We do, as you probably noticed, if you're a regular listener, we do 3 episodes per week. On Tuesday mornings, you'll get an episode with a guest. On Thursday mornings, you'll get an episode that's me and Chris going into some topic with a little bit more depth. And then on Friday, we release a bonus episode that we call The Agility Conversation, which is Chris and Mike Richardson and myself talking about matters of agility and how to make your organization more agile. So, with regard to our Tuesday episodes with guests, we already have some great episodes recorded or planned that are coming up. So we have an episode that'll be coming up here soon with Kristen Sabot, where we'll be talking about veterans in the workplace. She's an expert in that area. It's going to be fantastic. And then we have an episode with Scott Tannenbaum. That's going to be a good one too that's coming out. That's all, and that one's all about the his book, Teams That Work. So you were going to say something about that, but I think you muted yourself.
Yeah,
there.
I muted my mic for a cough.
I could see your mouth moving.
We are human. I'm like, wah, 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 wah.
That's great. Yeah, jackwagon.
Yeah, I know. We record these ahead of time, right? So, and it's our guests are so good. You're like, gosh, let's release it now. You just can't wait. So Kristen Sabot, Scott Tannenbaum, Brad Johnson, and David Smith. We're going to talk about how guys can be allies to women in the workplace in a very not lame way.
Oh, it's going to be a good episode. Yeah,
it's going to be awesome.
Soon. Yep. We're going to do an episode with Paul Spector. Those of you who are in the world of industrial and organizational psychology, you should know who Paul Spector is. He's a giant in that field. He is certainly a giant in the world of occupational health psychology. It's going to be a fantastic episode about some of the risks that the workplace brings to our psychological health and how we can better deal with it. We're also going to do an episode with Forrest Faison. And Forrest Faison is a retired vice admiral. It's a 3-star admiral from the United States Navy. He was the Surgeon General of the Navy. He's a physician, and now he works at Cleveland State University. And one thing that he's doing there as part of his role is he's heading up our COVID response. He's doing that in coordination with other universities as well. So just a fascinating person with a depth of experience. That's going to be a wonderful episode. I can't wait.
Now, the last guest that we have on, I think we got a few more, but we didn't put them in the notes here. But anyway, Rachel Wernicke. And, we were just talking to her about some, business type environment stuff and all that stuff. And we're like, oh man, she's so good. We need to do an episode with us, would you?
That's right. So she has a background in clinical psychology, and we're going to do a great episode all about self-talk and how we can manage that mind chatter that we all have when we talk to ourselves in our minds, and how important that is for our everyday functioning. So, I think we have a great lineup coming in. We're going to continue doing our episodes, just you and me. We're going to continue doing the agility conversation. Who knows where we'll go next? One thing I just really want to say and emphasize is just a thank you to the thousands upon thousands of people who have downloaded our episodes. We didn't mention that. We've grown, and we have a pretty darn good reach now. And this is in a crowded space in which we've done no advertising. Right? We've told people, hey, if you like our episodes, share them with a friend, and continue to do that. Absolutely do that. Give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Give us a 5-star rating. But we have grown. I just want to say thank you. We're humbled by your listening and by being a member of our community and our audience. We really appreciate that.
Right. So guys, on that note, share, tweet, the Insta, whatever, all that all the social medias.
Yes.
You know what to do better than we, unfortunately, better than we do.
Get out there and do the Instaface thing.
Yeah. But really, I cannot thank you enough. And if you don't think we don't read every piece of email or text message or reach out on social media, you're wrong. We totally do. Please reach out. We love getting encouragement and feedback. And honestly, you guys tell us what to cover, So very quickly we turn around episodes based on request. And we just want to thank just everybody that we've come across. We've met some of the coolest people on the face of the planet. And I think we have some of the coolest listeners on the face of the planet.
That's right. And I just want to thank the coolest co-host of this podcast. Chris, you have just been a phenomenal intellectual piece of this journey, as well as our technical and audio engineering guru to make it all sound decent. So really appreciate your partnership on this entire endeavor.
Thanks, Ben. One of the best things ever happened to me is what we're doing right here, and I look forward to the future.
Totally agree.